Well, a friend of mine recently posted on Facebook that he would be offline for an entire week as he was going on a 7-day silent retreat at a retreat house somewhere in Indiana. And underneath his post there were several comments. One of them said, "That's crazy, man. I could never do something like that. I'd go stark raving mad." And someone else wrote, "Wow, that is amazing. I could never do something like that. You're a better man than I." And someone else wrote, "You are so amazing and inspiring, my friend. I am in awe of your willpower and your courage." And as I read those comments, I thought to myself, how in the world did we get to a place where being alone in the silence is considered crazy or difficult or somehow heroic? How did we get to a place where being on your own, alone in the silence, is considered something to be avoided at all costs, rather than something that we should be pursuing fervently? And I think it's because there are so many people who are afraid to be left alone with their own thoughts. They're afraid of what they will hear. They're afraid to do what Jesus did in today's gospel, to go out into the wilderness alone and to face their demons. I was about the age of Jesus in today's gospel, 30 years old, when I went on my very first silent retreat. I spent a week at a retreat house in upstate New York in the woods. There was no TV, no phones, no radios or newspapers. This, of course, was before the time of cell phones and the internet. It was a week of complete silence. I didn't speak to anyone. And it was the greatest gift that I ever gave myself. I have been on 2 other silent retreats since then, and I'm so looking forward to planning my next one. Next Sunday, we are going to have a Native American water protector from Standing Rock come and speak with us here. The indigenous people, as you know, would send their young people when they came of age out into the wilderness alone. They called this a vision quest. That in order for this young person to grow spiritually, they needed to go out into the wilderness, into the unknown, so that they could return reborn. And that's how I felt when I come home from 7 days of silence, reborn. That's what the season of Lent is all about. All of us can't go on a silent retreat in the next 40 days, but we can make time every day to go into the silence. Now, Jesus, in today's gospel, spends way more than 7 days. He spends 40 days and nights. We should not take this number literally. We know that the stories of the Bible were written and understood symbolically. Jesus' growing up and learning from the Hebrew scripture, he interpreted scripture symbolically, and so should we. Today's readings, I guarantee you, there was no talking snake. I guarantee you. When that was written and shared with the people, no one in that time believed there was a talking snake. They understood the story to be symbolic. It wasn't a literal history. And it's the same thing with Jesus in the desert. I guarantee you there was no guy tempting Jesus in the desert for 40 days and nights. It's a symbolic story to help us. 40 is seen throughout the Bible. It's symbolic. It stands for a period of testing and preparation. So we know that there was rain for 40 days and 40 nights during the time of Noah. We know that Moses spent 40 days and 40 nights up at the top of Mount Sinai before receiving the commandments. And we know that he spent 40 years in the desert leading people out of slavery. We keep hearing this number 40. It's symbolic. It's not literal. We don't know how long Jesus was in the desert, but we know that he needed to go through this period of testing, of preparation, in order for him to begin his ministry. So what was actually happening there? Jesus needed to face his demons, and so do we. Now, I want to explain what I mean by this. The word demon is very uncomfortable for many of us. Most of us in this room, we have grown in our concepts of God. Most of us here don't see God as an old man up in the sky with a long beard and sandals who's looking down and judging us. We've grown from that. We understand that God is the divine light and love of the universe that dwells within us and within all of creation. So because we've grown in our concept of God, can't we grow in our concept of the devil? Okay. The devil is not a guy in red with horns and a tail and a pitchfork. Okay? There isn't some devil out there, I promise you. There isn't. The devil is not found in any of the world's major faith traditions except for Christianity. Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, Native American spirituality, and yes, Judaism, Jesus' own faith, do not believe in the devil or in hell. Those concepts were conjured up by the early Christian church. They based the devil, the persona of the devil, on the Greek god Pan. Pan has hooves and horns, and Pan represented sex, and he was the god of the wild. So the church based the persona of the devil on him. Jesus in this gospel story is not being tempted by a man. So who is he being tempted by? Who's saying these things to him? Some outside voice? Or is Jesus hearing his own voice? Now, there are some Christians who say, well, Jesus knew he was God from when he was a baby. I mean, Jesus in the manger knew he was God. Well, then why would he be tempted? How could you tempt God? Jesus in the desert is a 30-year-old man coming to the understanding of his own divine power. And in order for him to fully express that God nature, he has to overcome the voice of ego. And that's what is happening here. The ego saying, you can use this power to have everything. You could be a king. You could have wealth. You could have fame. And Jesus has to speak truth to that, to overcome that. And that's what this period of Lent is for us to do, is to go into the silence and to listen to that voice and to speak truth to it. In John's gospel, Jesus would call this voice the father of lies. That's who Satan is. Jesus says in today's gospel, "Away with you, Satan." Well, Jesus also called his own apostle Peter Satan. Peter was his best friend. Peter was his rock. But Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." Jesus wasn't saying that Peter was the personification of evil. The word Satan is a Hebrew word which means adversary. Jesus' exact words to Peter are, "Get behind me, Peter, for you are a stumbling block to me. For you have your mind set on God's, not on God's interests, but on your own." Remember, Peter was trying to keep Jesus from going to Jerusalem and fulfilling his true purpose. So Jesus refers to him as Satan. Jesus didn't think of Satan as some red-horned devil. Okay? Jesus was saying that the adversary, the opponent that's trying to keep us from our true purpose, that's Satan. All of us have a purpose, a divine purpose. The voice of the ego is trying to keep us from discovering that purpose, from discovering our oneness with God. Because once we discover it, the ego's defeated, doesn't have a purpose anymore. So it's going to keep telling us lies. As Jesus said, Jesus called the father of lies. The lie that says, "You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You don't have enough. You're broken." The season of Lent is a time for you each day to find time to be silent, to be still. And when you hear those lies, to do as Jesus did in the desert. Not to wrestle with it. Jesus didn't fight it. Jesus just spoke truth to it. So when you hear, "You're not good enough," in the silence you speak truth to it. "No, I am. I am the light of the world. I am a son or daughter of God. I have God's DNA in me. So yes, I am enough. Thank you for sharing." Okay? That's what we do in the silence. We are transforming our negative thinking, our worries, our fears, our anxiety, and we are speaking truth to them. Another name for the devil is Mephistopheles. And Mephistopheles is one who hides from the light. And the Spanish word for devil is diablo. And diablo means to pull apart. When you hide from the light of your truth of your being, when you are pulled apart, when you're not whole, when you're not one with God, that's what we mean by the devil. It's not some outside force in the world whispering in your ear to do bad things. It's what you are hearing that keeps you from your connection with God. Jesus' whole purpose for being, his whole mission, was to teach us that we and the Father are one, that we are sons and daughters of God, and that we are the light of the world. We heard in our words of integration this morning that Lent is a time of preparation. And I love what Clara May Rowland said about it. She said, "The primary purpose of Lent is to prepare us mentally, physically, and spiritually for a new awakening, to resurrect us out of old states of consciousness into new ways of being, into a new realization of life." That's my hope for all of you in the next 40 days. My hope is that all of you will make this the most meaningful Lent you've ever had in your life. And you can do that by preparing yourself each day, by going into the desert, the darkness, the wilderness, the silence. Do not be afraid. The voices you hear have no power over you other than the power you give them. Go into the silence, and in the silence, speak the truth. Words of affirmation, words of truth. I would like to conclude by reading words from the book of Hosea. This is God speaking, and God says, "The wilderness will lead you to your heart, where I will speak." In the UCC, we say God is still speaking. God is still speaking to us. And we can hear that voice in the silence. So this Lent, each day, be still and know. Namaste.